1973 was the year in which I got locked up. I love to talk about growing up in Haslington. It's a place I love dearly. And reason being is one of those places that you have 100 rods of land at the back. And I remember friends from Enore, BZ, Newtown, Enmore Pasture, they loved to come there because there was such a wide expanse of land, lots of fruit trees, lots of running water, and there was always a lot of fun. So I love Haslington. And I'm glad that you asked about what it was like to live there. So imagine an environment where you had no road. It was a mud dam. People living in thatched houses. People had no drinking water, no electricity. So that was the environment. But what we had was a lot of people who had children, and we had a lot of love and a lot of sharing. And to my mind, it was one of the most beautiful things, that although you know that you were poor, you never felt poor because everybody lived the same way. And you can go to your neighbor and say, I'm hungry, and they will give you food. And it was okay. And if somebody give you a dress that no longer fits them, you were happy to wear a hand-me-down without feeling bad. So this is the environment that you grew up. So everybody was poor, and that was fine. For example, I never had a doll in my life. My parents couldn't afford to give me one, and there was no need either. Because when you have 10 children and all the people were making 8 and 9 and 7 children, not like today. So there were always lots of children to play. So you never thought that you needed a doll. Growing up in Enmore Estate, so when you sit at our platform, as we would call it then, today you call it veranda, right? So we sit at our platform and we would watch, we would see people walking on the Enmore, they call it the Flower Road. I remember there were always picketings that were taking place right by Banneret Square as you go into the estate, always picketing. So I remember I was probably about 6 or so or 7 years of age, and we were going to school, and I saw the picket line and I was curious. I wanted to know what it was all about. And I told my friend from Haslington, hold my books, I'm going to join the line. For me, it was like fun. So I went and I was walking with them. And then we got tear gassed. And then we had to run. There was a place called where you throw the liquor down. And we had to run, and they said, put water, and cover your face. And for me, that was fun. I didn't understand the meaning of that. But for me, it was my first, how you say, experience.
Was this a protest by the Sugar Workers Union at
Yes,
the time?
always the workers were fighting for different things. Remember, it is through struggle they got what they wanted. So always there was some sort of struggle that was taking place.
Right across from where you live
Okay,
was what we call the compound, the manager's compound.
that's right.
Tell me what was going through your mind at that time when you looked at that, obviously glaring inequality.
Something that struck me, that because the way we lived in darkness, and I could sit at my grandfather's platform and I watch over the big yards.
The white concrete houses.
Yeah, those beautiful houses. And I see lights, and I see beautiful girls in their bathing suit with their boyfriends.
Because they had a pool there.
Yeah, there was a pool. And you also saw everything that is modern today, you were seeing it there. And then I used to ask myself, but how come they live like that and we don't live like that? And I said, oh, because we were black and brown, that's why. This is what I am asking and thinking, but I never knew that later on I would know about this. So that was another thing that I realized very early. There was a difference between the way they lived and the way we lived. My grandfather, he worked with one of the estate managers, and every Christmas time he would bring home like little things from, let's say if they have lights and the lights weren't working, those colored bulbs, he would bring it home. They weren't working, but it was something that we really admired and we were excited about it imagine lights with all these colors. It didn't matter whether it was working, but we enjoyed that. Or bringing flowers home, that was something else that I enjoyed from that. But I hated mud. I hated mud so badly because whenever it rains, you have to walk in the mud, and the cows will walk and they plow and they do their number 2 on the ground, and you had to walk on it, and how I hated it, right? Of course, I don't know, I was an avid reader, and I used to live in the world of books because that is where I found my happiness, because it was a different world altogether. And then when you look at the way people were living, you know, you realize there is a difference. But what was interesting is that after the Sugar Industry Labor Welfare Fund, they started a program where sugar workers could have borrowed money from the estate to build a house.
You're talking about Stillwift.
Stillwift, yeah. And what happened, 2 persons got a loan. One was my father, who had then 10 children, and another guy, he got also a loan. And the amount of money they got was $4,000, and you had to pay like cents, like 35 cents per week or 10 cents per week, I can't remember, but you couldn't pay it in dollars because you didn't have that money. So they paid it every week as you earn, they will take out a little bit from that money. And so he started to build a house. And he was a very industrious man, my father.
What was your house like before that?
I don't remember a house, but I know that when I think I was about 4, and I remember living in a house that was wooden, but had partition, and 2 sets of family were living in it, my father, little brother, and himself. And I understand the house had fallen down, and one of my cousins had got hurt in it. So when it fell down, we were living in the flat house, but it was still a wooden house. We never had a thatched roof or living in a mud house. But my neighbor, they had a mud house. And we used to love to go and spend time in the mud house.
What was that mud house like?
It had thatched roof, and they plastered the walls with mud, and then the floor was mud. Strange enough, it was always cool inside. But I was always scared because of the thatched roof. I was afraid of snakes, and I always imagined a snake would fall on me. So I never liked staying in there. And I thank God that we had a wooden place that we were in. After my father got this loan, he built a house. And halfway in the house, the money, it was not enough anyway. And he decided to build a house with himself, and my 3 elder brothers and all the cousins who were around, they all helped to build a house. So that is how I remember that. I recall by 1956 living in that house. My father was a man who, I think he was not a regular guy. He didn't have an education, but he had a brave heart, and he will never stand for injustice. And he would always stand up for the poor people. He knew how to use his hands. He will tear a bicycle down from the start and then fix it back. And he knew how to build. So anybody who was poor and they died, he would go build their coffin. And anybody who was building a house, he will help them. And then he came up with the idea we should have a society to have, when you have like weddings, you know, you need wares and zinc sheets. He came up with the idea, so they had a society. Then he came up with the idea of a burial society for all the boys who were working in the tillage gang. They were doing bulldozer operator and all of that. And they had another society, the tillage gang. And I suspect that's where I inherited that, wanting to get into doing all kinds of things. But, and he was a barber as well. So he sewed our clothes. He was a barber. He does construction work. What else does he do? He was involved in society work. And he was a man who, even though he was poor, he always tells us this. He said, if you're hungry, people will not know. But if you dress untidy and your skin and you look untidy, people will judge you. So you always say to us, be proud of poverty, because in your poverty, he taught us that us children must always press our clothes. We mustn't go out looking untidy. And you know, when he built his house, he went and he bring in a whole lot of earth, and we had a lawn. At that time, in the late 50s, we had lawns, and he planted silver leaf tree around it. And they take the wood and they whitewash the fence. And I used to say, wow, people used to say, look at them big shots, you know, that kind of thing. But my dad, he was really an industrious man. And also he believed in gender equality. My father, there were 3 big boys. And
Your father was a man named Danraj?
Yeah, yeah. My father believed in equality and he loved cherry. And I'll tell you a story. They used to go to a guy not far from where we live. We call him Cherry Tree Aja. And Cherry Tree Aja knew how to read and write, but nobody else there knew how to read and write. My father didn't, if he didn't know his name if he saw it. He didn't know how to read and write. And he told me when he was just about 10 years old, he had to go with his father to work in the estate. So Cherry Tree Aja, every Saturday when the PPP got in government in 57, they had to do streamers all over the place. And I remember putting up those streamers in 1957.
What were streamers?
Streamers is crepe paper, and you twist them around and then you hang them up, because we were celebrating Cherry entrance into, he became the Prime Minister of Guyana.
1957.
1957, I would have been about 6 years old. And those things, I remember when I was 4, the things that happened in that community. Somehow I got a good memory in terms of remembering those things.
Shortly after that, you joined another picket line. This is perhaps after the Gawo one.
Yeah.
When
more picket lines. I've joined many picket lines. That was the beginning of the first picket line.
But you ended up in jail because of that picket line for a week.
Well,
tell me about it. Tell me how that happened.
That's another story. 1973 was the year in which I got locked up. And I need to share a little bit about that with you. I was in the PPP group and the PYO, and we had some very militant young men there. And the opposition, the PNC at that time, they never did anything for the people of Enore. Always they bypass us. Nothing they will do for the people of Enore. And I was told that, look, they're coming to have a meeting at Hope West School. And I said, they're not going to have a meeting at Hope West School, not if I can help it. And we started to tell people that they're coming to the meeting and what. I went and collected 1 basket of rotten eggs.
Ganda egg.
Yeah, rotten eggs. And I said, we'll teach them a lesson. And we did teach them a lesson. But what was interesting, we had so much people came out just to boo them and to say, you can't come here. You didn't do nothing for the people. Get out of Enore. And we chased them out of Enore. And in the process, some thugs started beating us up. And that is when the story started.
There was a fight back.
Of course, there was a fight back. You would take that nonsense? Yes, the police station was broken. All the windows went. There were no more windows because the people were so incensed. Because we were lying on the bridge to prevent them from going over. It was a rainy day. And they take their baton and was beating the women. I was there with 2 sisters. Yeah. We call them thugs because they come without uniforms. And they were beating the women lying on the ground. And what do you expect us to do? Take it quietly and sit down? Well, there was a scuffle, and they threw some of the guys, our guys, in the trench. And then there was a retaliation. And eventually lots of people came out, a couple of hundreds of people. And they had to leave, but the windows were broken by then, all the things. So I went to by then they started picking up people, about 4 or 5 of the boys in the van. And I went and I told them, look, y'all don't worry, I'm going to call Comrade Janet. And they said, oh, you're you're playing you, Mrs. Jagens? We're going to deal with you. I went to the estate compound. I had known somebody who was the operator there and asked if I can make a call. So I did call because I had known the people they were working with Enore. And in the night, about 7:30 or thereabouts, a whole truckload of plainclothes people came to our door. And then You know, they stopped the vehicle with a lot of screeching and all of that, and push open the gate and ran up the stairs. And when they ran up the stairs, shake the door, open the door, came into the house. Where is Indra? Came in, and we had like 3 rooms and another place where you can put a bed. And we were all in one room, 2 beds there. And they proceed to pull my sisters out. 4 of us was in the room, and they pulled my little sister. She was 12. The other one would have been about 17. The other one would have been about 19. I was 21. So they pulled the 3 of them, and I was resisting, and they dragged me by my hair down the stairs, in our night dresses, you know, down the stairs, and took us into the van. Well, we had another sister who was in the next room, and she hid. When they were in the house, she ran downstairs and hid among the flower thing. And then as we were taken, there was a lot of screaming, and Mr. Wilson, who was the expat that was living closest to us, he heard the screaming, and they put all the estate, put on all the lights to know what was happening. My brother-in-law was coming from the cinema at the same time, and he wanted to know what was happening. When he came, they just throw him in the vehicle. My sister had just got baby. There was another guy who came to our rescue, and they beat him so badly. They stamped him with the boots. The boy died of cancer in his back, you know, right? And they took us to the Covent John prison. But I didn't even know I was bleeding, because the trauma of my back and whatever, the hurt. And then the boys, the comrades, and said, "You are in blood, what happened?" And I was telling them what happened. And anyway, so one of them took out their shirt, and I tied it on my waist and whatever. And imagine my small sister, she was only 12. The other one already she was having fever from home. And so there was trauma. By the time then, I would say 10, 11 o'clock, Mr. Barnum came. He was drunk. He was cursing. And he was saying, when I finish with the Enore people, they ain't got nobody to do their election work. He was really cussing. Remember, he lived in Bel Air.
Belfield.
Right, right. So that night we were sitting on the bench at the lockup. Next day they took us to Sparendam, passed us through the court, and 7 days jail. Myself and my 3rd sister went to New Amsterdam prison, and another sister and the 12-year-old went to Belfield Girls' School. Now, that story hit the BBC, by the way, because it is 4 sisters, and one was 12-year-old. And then the whole story about the rigging of the election, 1973 election, and that is something I need to share. So that was like 2 weeks before the election, this happened. And then I was a polling agent for the PPP. Derek Jagens was the election agent, and they refused to allow him to follow the ballot boxes. But some of the boys at the police station, they were very sympathetic to the PPP and both races, and they had seen what we went through, and we became like, they were sympathetic. So when the armored car came and they collected the ballot boxes, one of the police guy, I told him they're not allowing Derek Jagens to go. He said, "You jump in the vehicle." So I jumped in the vehicle and I went with them. And we started out at Golden Grove, and there was a big celebration. We done win already, you know that saying. And they had about 40 to 50 boxes of Banks Beer, already drunk. People were drunk. And every places we go that were PNC stronghold, there were people there already drunk. We got in Georgetown, I would say about closer to 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I noticed the place was unusually quiet. And what is this? Anyway, one of the policemen said to me, "You have to come out from here because you can't go anymore." But I said, "You're already supposed to take the ballot boxes to Queen's College." They said, "No." They stopped by the GDF compound. I walked from there, came to Freedom House, and when Mrs. Jagens saw me, "What are you doing here?" I said they took the ballot. I explained to her that they took the ballot boxes to the GDF compound, and she was on the Elections Commission, so she went and asked, "Where are the ballot boxes?" And in the meantime, my family think I'm dead because they didn't know where I was, and there is no phone that you can really make connection. Subsequently, early morning, I call the operator at the estate and say, "Please tell my parents that I'm alive." People were already gathering at the house because they didn't know what had happened to me. So I feel bad that I brought so much pain to my family, but I grew up with a kind of rebellious heart. And because I passionately believed that one day good will come to Guyana. I believed that the people will come to power one day. I loved Comrade and Comrade
Did you think it was going to happen in 1992? Was that too soon for you?
I saw it could have happened in 1973 actually. The people were already turning against the government then. It could have happened in 73, and that is why they had to hijack the ballot boxes. Now you know all elections were rigged. PPP won in 53, and we know what happened. The British suspended the Constitution, even though they had won 18 out of 24 seats. They won in 1957, and that is where poor people in this country saw good things coming to them. Fabric was like 3 yards per dollar. The GMC vehicles were going to communities selling plantain, penny a pound and stuff like that. The school vans used to go to school and give you biscuits and cod liver oil tablet. And people got once for all bonus. So people said, "Oh my goodness, this new government that has come to power," they see that their lives have improved. So that was 57 up to 61. And when all those things, the Blackbush boulder, those ferries and all of that happened. But what happened, independence was promised to Guyana, and Dr. Jagens, when in 1958 in the Legislative Council, raised the issue of self-governance. And the idea is that they were supposed to lead a delegation to the House of Commons and to lobby for independence. Now what happened there, the PPP eventually, the elections of 53 was under adult suffrage. The PPP won 18 out of 24 seats. Imagine that, Burnham, Chetty, Ashton, Jocelyn Hubbard, Janet, all, I call them the national leaders at that time. This country, imagine 18 out of 24 seats, amazing. And if you see the manifesto, and I would like you all to look at a copy of that manifesto, 133 days of the PPP in office, and to see all the things they would have been done for Guyana. Guyana would have been, oh, I don't know where it would have been today. But that was something, and the British had to remove the PPP government because when they look at what the government wanted to do for the people, they cannot allow that to happen because it can be used for any other countries to use us as a blueprint to lobby for the betterment of their own country. When the Constitution was suspended, they restricted our leaders. They could not have gone to certain areas. Chetty and Janet both broke their restriction order. One went to a church, a temple. Janet went to a temple, and Chetty went to another place because they were saying to them, your restriction order would have been started from from 53 until 55. So it means if you are living in the city, you can't move out of the city. You have to stay in the city. So, and then what they do, Martin Carter, Rory Westmus, there are 5 people, they had them in detention at Atkinson Airport, and then later on, 9 other persons were in prison. And what the government, I would say the British did, they start working on Burnham ego, because they realized he had an ego problem. Start working on him and encouraging him to split the PPP. And that was done through a hurriedly called Congress. While our leaders were locked up, he's calling a Congress and vote himself as a leader of the party. So that was that history. PPP split in 1955. By 1957, another election. The PPP won then. And then in 58, Dr. Jagens, as the Minister of Trade, I think, and something else, he raised the issue in the Legislative Council of self-governance. And that was, they had to go to meet the British people because they were our colonial masters to talk about independence. And that is where you had a lot of delayance because the plan was, remember elections were just held in 61. So the plan was that the PPP would have gone to independence, but the British had other plans. And the other plan was they started to work with other parties.
The TUFN at the time?
Yes. They figured that no, they shouldn't have any one party winning the votes. So what they did, they worked and they were able to get the United Force to take a position. And a strike was called and the United Force locked the country, the city down. And this is when all the trouble started. So the CIA, along with the British, they were part of the plot to destabilize the PPP government, cause unrest. And what they did, the way they did it, they killed an Indian and throw him in an Afro-Guyanese community, kill an Afro-Guyanese and throw him in an Indian community so they can think that is one of them do it. But it was all part of the X-13 plan to destabilize the PPP government. And that is how they burned the city down. And then the other problem had to do with Wismar. As you know, it was claimed that the PPP was responsible for Son Chapman, which was not true. Son Chapman, as a rule, would usually take the dynamite because that is how they will mine the place. But one of the officers made a blunder by putting the dynamite too close to the engine. And that is how the boat, and that is how the fire occurred, and all the people, they were killed, not because of PPP, because of the error of one of the workers. So there was an investigation, and the diver who went confirmed that. And what happened, they sent the diver away to Brazil because they felt that he shouldn't tell the truth. So they will use all of that to create more trouble in the country. And so what we had is eventually the fact they used the disturbance to postpone the elections. And then when elections were held again in 1964, even though the PPP won the majority of the votes, they did not call on the PPP to form the government because this was the plan. United Force worked with the PNC, and that was how PPP came out of office. Independence came to Guyana, and they used the day that the massacre occurred in Wismar as a date for independence. So in a nutshell, these are some of the things that we have to let the Guyanese people know. We fight among ourselves, but the same Indo and Afro-Guyanese had united to get all these benefits for the colony called British Guyana. And had we continued working together, Guyana would have been a better place. But the British loved the divide and rule tactics. We have seen them in Northern Ireland doing that. We've seen they did it in India and Pakistan. We see them doing it in Africa and many parts of the world. Divide and rule, and we will be always in charge and we will conquer. So our people now have to understand whatever had happened in the past, it was not because we hated each other. And I want to give you a personal example to tell you, growing up in Enore, my parents were Hindus. My mother was a Hindu. My father didn't really believe in anything until he joined the Arya Samaj group. But he used to allow Sister Ben from Golden Grove to come and do Sunday school at our bottom house. So I go and I clap my hands and I sing all them songs. But our parents are still Hindus. That's the kind of tolerance we exhibited. And Uncle Payne will come from Golden Grove and he'd come and eat. He called my mother Didi, which is her sister. And we lived beautifully. And you know what hurt me very much is after the disturbance, when our people, my Indo-Guyanese friends, that we were sisters when they went away and lived elsewhere, that hurt me a lot, to show that how these people can destabilize countries and make people who, they did it in, we saw it clearly in Northern Ireland, as well as in India and Pakistan and so on.
Right, so after that period, you were obviously thick with the PPP in fighting for the restoration of democracy.
Oh, of course.
You were very close with the Jagens. What it is about them that caused you to continue working with them so forcefully?
Well, you know, as I said, I grew up in a home that believed in Comercelli. But when we were kids, and because of the Enore martyrs, every year there is a celebration, or I wouldn't call it a celebration, there's a public meeting in which you will have Dr. Jagens or Mrs. Jagens, or both of them will come and speak at Roberts Square. And we will walk with our bags and we will sit in front as children and we listen to him. And
this is the June 16th celebration?
Yeah, always. And that was something that you have seen your leaders up front, and we loved them because they were so charismatic. And when you hear the older people talk about what they've been doing for the country and all of that, and you know, you said, oh my goodness, these people have done so much for us. So I grew up hearing about them before I actually got involved. Remember, I would have seen them on the public platform at Robert Square, but I didn't have an opportunity to touch base. But here's the story. In 1970, after I became a PYU and all of that, Indrajit Singh, who was the organizer, had asked me to go get the flowers for the garland. So I picked all the flowers and I am running to go and to take the garland because Chetty was coming to speak. Secretly, he had in mind to put me as the chair, never told me anything. So you know when you're running, oh gosh, you're tired and your heart is racing. And then he says on the public platform, on the mic, I see our chairperson coming there. I could have died. I could have fallen down and dead with fear. Anyway, I said, no, I can't do it. He said, yes, you will do it. And he put me on the thing. Comercelli was standing there. Comercelli smiled at me. He said, you can do it. He said, you know what? I was nervous as you when I started. I know it wasn't so, but he's trying to make me feel good. And I start talking and my teeth chattering and all of that. And then I start gaining confidence. And I did what I had to do. So that was for the first time I met him in 1970. And Janet came to our home to form the first WPO group. And that's how I met them. From then on, and I worked with them from 1972, from July 1972 until 1992, 6 days a week. They were my family. They were like my parents. And I've seen them in all their colors. I've seen how they struggle. I've seen the home in which actually I had the key for the home after she died. I have the key for Red House. And do you know what they said? What Janet told my husband? She said to my husband, Navin, I know Chetty legacy will always be alive as long as you are around. And then when my husband got that devastating news, he said to me, I want you to continue doing what you have been doing for the Chetty Jagens Research Center. So I love them. They love me as a daughter. And it's not only that, it's about the things, what they've done for our country, is the way they live their life. And when you interact with somebody and you see their simplicity, their honesty, their integrity, and I'll give you one instance. Comercelli would go overseas. This was in the days of hardships. And if he bring back a pound of garlic, something as simple as that, he will make sure every comrade working at Freedom House gets some garlic. And if he bring back some, the vitamins for the children, all of us who had children will get a little bit of thing. And when is our birthday, Comrade Janet will come at our door. She didn't have much, but she will bring a bottle of tomato ketchup or whatever little she can have from her home, she bring it to us. Let me ask you a question. Where would you find leaders like those? You don't find them. And she will allow the people who had leprosy at the Mahaika Asylum, and when they come to Freedom House, and the comrades will say that you can't go upstairs. And they will say, no, she's my Bauji. I will go upstairs, and the guy will go upstairs and will sit. She has her typewriter, and she would sit with him. Now, cancer or leprosy was on the verge of being controlled, eradicated, but she was never, how you say, she never scorned them. She worked with them, and she would always take money from her purse and give it to her. When they died, both of them, they had no money. I know that because Nadira is my friend. They had no money because Janet would give away her money to anybody who will come and ask for help at Freedom House. How can you not love people like these? And I would have loved for some of the people to go and see what the house is. Their bedroom had a homemade wardrobe. That's what they have. The kitchen was so small, you can't turn around too much. They lived so simple, so simple.
And so when the PPP came to power, you obviously became a minister and member of parliament, which you served many positions over the years, including chief whip. And now you chair the Gender Equality Commission.
Yeah.
You're still fighting for that equality.
Oh, yes.
What would you say is the thing at this moment, the priority that you'd like to see addressed?
Well, gender equality is fine. I would love to see a reduction in violence in all forms. I would love to see more programs in parenting because I worry for our young people of tomorrow. There are too much, I would say too many challenges out there, social media, all these things, substance abuse and all these things, families that are falling apart. I worry about those things. I like to see those things if as a nation that we can fix them so that we try to solve the problem. I would love our country to heal as a nation, that we should not look at each other as being different. We're all Guyanese. I want us to see each other as brothers and sisters and working together. And I remember in 1991, we could not have gone to an Amerindian community. It was not allowed. You had to go through the Minister of Interior Development. But outsiders were not allowed to go into the hinterland community. Only the people who were preachers, the missionaries, they had all the freedom, and the government of the day. And what I'm happy about is to see all that transformation in the indigenous communities, and how today we have one, everybody can move into another community. The other thing I love to see is what has happened in the housing. As you know, I was in the housing. First, under the PPP government, I was very much there, working with the poor people. And the fact that you have housing development where you have a mixture of all people and they're learning to live together, because that is how we grew up in Enore. People of all different races live together, play together, work together. I want to see that cohesion if we can work. And I know the president with the One Guyana initiative, and I know One People, One Nation destiny coined by Robeson Ben Father. These are things we aspire because we came from that. And thanks to the American and the British, we had that, we saw that fragmented, but I would love to see our people working together.